Please, what do we remember from yesterday? Calvin.
So we looked at the version control system. And we said it's a software tool that helps developers manage changes to codes, documents, or other contents over time. And I also asked the question about the equal to sign, the single equal to sign and a double equal to sign, which was explained to me that the double equal to sign returns to a Boolean value, which is true or false. And it's also used to check for equality between two values. And the single equal to sign assigns value to a variable. Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you, Calvin. Jennifer.
Hello, Akusia. So, yesterday we spoke about IDEs, integrated development environment, and I learned that it's where developers can write code, like edit it, and debug. Yes, yeah.
All right, thank you, Jennifer. Does anybody remember examples of IDs? Or there's one famous one that I mentioned. You can just unmute and mention it.
VS Code.
Thank you, Jenny. All right, Dennis.
Yes, so I also remember that we were introduced to programming, and then we looked at what programming is, and we said it is the act of writing instructions for the computer to take specific actions on them. And then we looked at some um, uh, ways or methods that we use in programming. So we looked at conditional statements, we looked at loops, and we looked at collections and data types. Yes.
All right, thank you, Dennis. Yesterday we had an introduction to programming, and we said it's just a way for us to give instructions to the computer. And we mentioned that one of the um or some of the points or some of the essence of programming is to solve a problem and also to automate. When we talk about automation, we're reducing the amount or the need for human interaction when it comes to daily processes and functions that we have to perform. Yakubu.
Yeah, hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yesterday we also looked at data types, and then we said the data types helps the computer identify what to do with data or with the type. So we have strings. Strings are covered in quotation marks. Then we have integers, and we have long, we have Boolean, and then we have floats. Floats are decimals. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Yakubu. So yes, yesterday we looked at data types and we mentioned that depending on the type of data or the type of value that you give to to your code or to your program or to your software, that is how the interpreter or the compiler knows what to do with whatever value that you have given it. So each data type has their own properties and certain functions that you can perform on them. So we also mentioned that the way the system stores data is with zeros and ones. So we looked at how the number one, the binary value for it is the same as the binary value for true when it comes to a Boolean. So the system knows to store this binary value as a certain type so that whenever you want to perform an operation on it, it checks whether the type that you have stored would be able to, or it can be able to perform that function on that type. Thank you, Yakubu. Ruben.
Yeah, madam. Yesterday we also learned about the building blocks of program. That's the elements that we build on. So we talk of the grammatic aspects, that is the syntax or the structure that we need to build our program on. Then we talk also about punctuations that we need to syntax must be clearly structured. So we need punctuation, wherever punctuation deserves, then you have to do it. Then we talk about the third, that is the vocabulary. So that is the keywords and the identifiers. That is what I also learned from yesterday's lesson. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruben. So yesterday we mentioned that when it comes to programming, we have various languages that we can use, just as how we have French, English, which we use to communicate. We used to send a message or send instructions to our fellow human beings. Same way, when we are communicating instructions to the computer, we would need to do it in a particular language. And depending on the language that you use, you'd realize that what runs through is the punctuations, the keywords or the grammar, and then Ruben, please remind me about the last one you just mentioned.
And the vocabulary.
The vocabulary or the keyword, the
Yeah, the keyword
punctuations.
or the identifiers.
All right, so depending on the language that you'd be using, you realize that the syntax would be different for some. The syntax would be, some of them you'd require different rules than others. Thank you, Ruben. Osman.
Madam, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
What I can also remember that yesterday we also talked about the flow control of our program. That is where we talk about the condition. That is where you use the if. Depending on the condition, the program will act on what to do. And that is where we talk about the if and the if else was in statements. We also talk about version control. That is where we talk about GitHub and Git. And I learned that the GitHub is more or less a website where we can push our course over there or something over there. And the Git is the interface we use to interact with our with the GitHub. So that is what I learned yesterday.
All right, thank you, Osman. So as Osman mentioned, we looked at flow control. We mentioned that as a good programmer, you should be able to anticipate the path or the mental process that the users of your application or the users of your software they go through. So when they get to this point, they might have to choose between this and this. When they choose this, should my program end? No, it should continue and do this or that. So you should be able to anticipate all those things and effectively include them inside of your code so that your users are able to have a seamless and a flowing kind of experience whenever your software or your app is being used. And we also mentioned Git. We looked at how to create a repo on Git. We mentioned that Git is where you store your source code. So if for collaboration, for instance, so if you need to collaborate or you need to work on a single code with your colleagues or other members of your team, we mentioned that you would be able to store the code in Git while everybody collaborates. And we mentioned that it is secure because you're able to know when changes are made, you're able to know who made the changes, etc. And it helps with version control in the sense that whenever you make any updates or any changes, they are versioned. So the first version, the second version, and that helps whenever you need to roll back, you know that there's somewhere that has whatever code that you were working on. Thank you, Osman. Okay, I believe that is all for today. So let me just share my screen and then we start with introduction to Python. Okay. Please, can we all see my screen?
Yes, I
Yes, please.
see it.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. All right, so what is Python?
It's a snake.
Perez has given us the biological perspective, the tech perspective. What is Python? Ruben.
Python is also part of a computer program. So there are many computer programs, but Python is also one of them.
All right.
It's easy to interact with.
All right, thank you, Ruben. Terry,
Good afternoon.
good afternoon.
So Python is should I say, a high level, it's a high level and it's also a general purpose programming language.
Okay, Terry. Could you tell us what you mean by high level?
So when I say high level, because can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, you see, when you're developing a website and then softwares, you can be able to use it for task automation, data analysis, and then data visualization. So you're able to get enough features when it comes to using Python. So, and also general purpose as well because of all these features that it has. So it has also been look over my workers. So it's easy to learn. And then yes, basically.
All right, thank you, Terry. So who remembers what we said about compilers and interpreters yesterday when it comes to programming languages? Dennis.
Yeah, so he said that with compilers, you compile the whole program before you'd be able to run it. But with the interpreters, they interpret or execute the program whilst as you are typing or programming the codes.
All right, thank you, Dennis. So yesterday we mentioned how whenever you write some code or when you write a software, though it's instructions for the computer, you are going to need either a compiler or an interpreter to be able to get it to how the computer understands. So the language that you have written, for instance, if it's Python, Python is a high level language. So you write in Python, and then when it comes to Python, what you use is an interpreter. So as you run your code, the interpreter for Python translates the code to a language that the computer can understand. And when it comes to compiling, an example would be a language like C, where you have to compile the whole code before it is able to run, or before the computer is able to do whatever instructions that you have given to it. So C is a low level language, while Python is a high level language, so to say. So as we mentioned, Python is a free and easy to learn general purpose programming language. We say Python is easy because as compared to other languages, Python is easy. So I would say looking at the code, you should be able to tell kind of like what is going on. So it's really simple and straightforward and more like intuitive. So you give it the instruction exactly what you're trying to get it to do, so to say. Yakubu.
Yeah, so with regards to the high level and low level, so is it because Python is an interpreter, that's why it's a high level, and a C is a compiler because it is a low level language?
Dennis, you want to answer that?
Yes, please.
Please go ahead.
Okay, so With the difference between high level and low level is that for instance, when you code, the computer, we all know the computer doesn't understand the English we type for it. It has to convert it to bits or bytes. And so
Yes.
that is known as the machine language or the machine code. So now programming languages sort of abstract that complexity of you having to write code. Imagine you have to write codes in zeros and ones. I mean, just T alone is a whole lot of bits that you have to type on the in the ID. So now, if we say programming language is high level, it means it is very close to English, and then either the compiler or the interpreter is the intermediary which converts that English-like syntax to the machine code. And then when we say a language is low level, like C, it means it is very close to the machine code. So it's not too far from the code. Like the way you write codes in C is somehow sometimes similar to writing direct, like the bit. It's very low. It doesn't take the compiler a lot of work to convert a C code to a machine language, but it takes a lot of work to convert a code like Python, which is very English-like, to machine code. So basically, that's the difference.
All right. Thank you, Dennis. Kofi Atom.
Okay, so I think Denise has said it all. So high level languages are, let me say, more human readable, yeah, than the low level. The low level is very closer to the machine code, what machine is able to understand, the ones and zeros, and then the high level is what we humans can understand. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Kofi. So that is one of the reasons why Python is preferred. That's because it's high level. So it's easier to write Python code than to write low level languages like C. Other reasons why Python is preferred is because the interpreter enables fast exploratory programming. So we mentioned that for compilers, you would have to make whatever changes or finish writing the code, compile it, because it compiles the whole code before you're able to run it. But with interpreters, when you run the code, it translates it to the machine code as you are running the code. So interpreters are faster to use because you don't have to wait for the whole code to compile before moving on. So Python enables fast exploratory programming. You interpret as you go along. And it also has the feature of dynamic typing, which makes it easy to write quick scripts. We mentioned that in a language like C, whenever you have to declare a variable, whenever you're using the variable for the first time, you have to say what data type it is. But Python has the ability to infer from the kind of type you've given it. So when you put 20, it knows that the value is an int. When you put true it knows that it's a Boolean value. So Python is able to infer, and this dynamic typing feature makes it preferred over other programming languages. Another reason too is the syntax. We mentioned that depending on what program you'll be using, the syntax will differ. So Python has a simpler syntax as compared to other languages. And Python can also support object-oriented structural and functional programming styles. So you work with functions, you are more focused or being specific on the function that you needed to do. So every other configuration in your code or in your software, you configure it in a way that it's function oriented, let me say. And another reason why Python is preferred is that it works across platforms. So irrespective of the OS that you'd be using, when you go to python.org, you'd find that there is a version of Python for you that you can be able to download and use to set up your Python environment on your machine. And we've looked at Bash scripts before, and today we are looking at Python because Bash scripting has some limitations. So as we go along, we'll see the limitations that Bash scripting has that Python comes to solve. So Bash scripting would, let me say, all right, so we would see that shortly. Where can you write Python? Yesterday we mentioned how code or software is written with simple text editors. So Python can be written in any text editor if you have the interpreter also installed. So the interpreter is what is going to translate from the human code to the machine code. And many developers use IDEs because IDEs help with finding syntax and exception errors. So it's like you're doing the task, and as you are performing it, you're getting feedback. I don't know if we have noticed, but in VS Code, when you're typing or when you're coding, you'd realize that if there's any error or if there's anything that is wrong inside of your code on the title pane, I don't know what to call it. The thing that looks like this, that says your text file, you see that it will be red. So you fix whatever you have to fix. So that is one feature helping with syntax and exception errors, and also color highlighting, etc. So it helps developers, IDEs help developers to code faster and better, and it helps to save time too. So these are some programs that I used to write Python code: AWS Cloud9, VS Code, Eclipse, Notepad, PyCharm, Vim, we know Vim, etc. So more on IDEs. So they provide syntax highlighting, code completion, debugging, version control. I'm very sure that yesterday when we were running the Python commands, we noticed how or when we were writing the Python scripts, we noticed the syntax highlighting. So some words had a different color than others. And depending on so when declaring functions, classes, and imports, they have a similar color, and then comments would be green. But we need to note that all syntax highlighting is customizable. So you can always change the color that you want Python to present the various keywords or the various identifiers inside your code. So this is AWS Cloud9. That is AWS's own VS Code. Okay, so AWS's IDE. So everything you can do with your VS Code, it's likely that you can also perform those functions with AWS Cloud9. Another feature of IDEs too is code completion. So with this example, we can see that when the developer types buckets and his care-size here, the IDE kind of gives them suggested or likely words that are likely to follow for them to just select from. So the arguments that are available. So it looks through your code, and then it kind of helps you. Okay, so it's kind of let me say, looking at your code to kind of predict what you are going to say next, what you are going to do next. And then if it makes sense, it will be able to suggest some things for you. And the ID too can be used for debugging. So would go line by line with you and inspect variables as you go from top to bottom, let me say. And you are able to change values as you inspect your code. So AWS Cloud9, I mentioned that it's AWS's own IDE. Starts projects quickly and code with only your web browser, and you're able to code together in real time. And you're also able to build serverless applications with ease. And a typical example, or let me give a scenario where it's like you're coding together in real time. With Google Docs, if you shared your link with somebody else and then they have editors permissions, whatever edits they are making, you can be able to see it when you are on the document. So it's the same idea here. As somebody else is coding somewhere in the world, you will be able to see whatever they are coding in real time when using AWS Cloud9. And a reason why Cloud9 is preferred over Git would be because, yesterday we looked at how in Git you're able to code on your local machine and then you push it to the Git repo. But in Cloud9, you can do it real time and you don't now have to commit and push whatever change that you made to the code. So like as you're coding, it's registering, let me see, or is reflecting for everyone that is working on that project. And we'll look at Lambda functions too shortly about how Cloud9 helps when using AWS Lambda. So we can liken a Cloud9 environment to we can liken our Cloud9 environments to, for example, our local machine. We can also liken it so it provides a runtime environment. So everything that your code is going to need when it's running, Cloud9 provides that, and you are able to link it to your server. You're able to connect your server to a Cloud9 environment. And it also integrates with AWS code commits, which we said was AWS's GitHub. That is where you can store, edit, push code inside of AWS. It's also a version control system like GitHub, but this is AWS's. So more features that Cloud9 has: live syntax checking, automatic indentation. And when we talk about automatic indentation, an example would be this. So after the developer entered DEF, entered this, after he puts the colon, when he presses enter, it won't take him back to under the DEF. It's indented to here for him. Automatic completion, we've looked at that. Code folding. An example of code folding would be your Canvas modules, for instance. You're able to the ones that you cheated already, or even the ones that you haven't cheated, but you're able to fold them to be short. Let me demonstrate this. I just pray they don't ask me to sign in. But you'd see a little triangle, and you'd be able to fold whatever instructions are under there. Even something like this. Yes, it looks like this. So when you click, it just folds it. So Cloud9 you're able to fold code. So for example, you want to be able to focus on this part, and then you just be able to fold this into this one line, fold this into this one line. So you can just concentrate on the parts that you need to concentrate on. Split panes, you're able to divide. So this is your text editor, and if you want a terminal right next to it, you can provision a new pane and it will split it into two. So your text your terminal is here, your text editor is here, or your terminal could even be below. You have control to manage the pins that you have. Version control integration. As you change things inside your code, version 1, version 2, Cloud9 is able to help you to track that multiple cases and selections. Sorry about that. Okay. And Cloud9 also has many languages. So these are the languages that you can code in when using Cloud9. So we mentioned that an IDE like PyCharm is Python specific. So when you put in C code or Java code, it will not be able to offer all those syntax highlighting, code completion, etc. Because PyCharm is Python specific, it will not be able to help you with that. You will need something like, for instance, VS Code, and then you install an extension for whatever language that you'll be coding in. So in this example too, or inside of Cloud9, these all these languages are supported. So if you code in any of these languages, Cloud9 would be able to offer you all those features that the Cloud9 IDE has to offer. So running Python applications, after you finish writing an application in Python, you can run it from the CLI. So this is your prompt. So you run this is what runs it. Who remembers how to run a bash script? Who can tell us? I mentioned 2 ways. Ellie.
Yeah, I remember you could use bash and then the name of the bash script.
All right, thank you, Ellie. And which other way again?
// and the name of the script.
Thank you, Ahiabu. So that is how to run a bash script. First way is to bring bash and then the name of your script. And we saw that with bash, it's .sh, but in Python, it's .py because that is the extension for Python code. And the other way to is to use // and then you just put the file name. But for Python, it's Python and then the file name. So depending on the Python version that you use, the last Python code I ran, I used Python 3 to run it. So depending on the Python version that you installed, that's what will determine this command that you give it. So if you have the Python 2 installed on your CLI, then you'd be able to run your Python code depending on which one you have installed. So if you have Python 3 installed, then you use that to run your Python code. And you can also run it from inside the IDE. So what if you need to make your Python code available to users around the world? You would use Lambda for that. So in AWS Lambda, you upload your code and you set it up to trigger from an event. So for example, every time a user visits my web page, the code should run. The code should do something. So Lambda would run that code whenever it's triggered, and it will only use the compute resources that it needs. And you only pay for the compute time that you use. So Lambda has a runtime limit of 15 minutes. So let's say your code or whatever function that you needed to do, when it runs for 10 minutes, then you pay for that 10 minutes. So the last time we looked at Penty's what's it called? Penty's account, and then we saw how he was being billed. For the NAS gateway, it was per hour. So depending on the service that you use in AWS, you're either billed by the second, by the minutes, by the hour. So in Lambda 2, for how long your code is running for, that is how much you'll be charged. And it supports multiple languages. And Cloud9 is included in the Lambda interface. That's where you are able to share code with developers and you guys can run and code in real time. And with Lambda, you have no servers to manage. And you can run code for virtually any application or backend service with almost no administration. So we've looked at IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS, and we mentioned how for IaaS you would need the infrastructure. So you need the computer. Let me give a scenario. So let's say Ellie has to, for instance, Ellie has to perform a calculation. He has to use the calculator app to perform probably some addition, okay? So Ellie doesn't have a PC. So if when it comes to infrastructure as a service, Ellie goes to provision a PC. He goes to borrow a PC and he now has to run some code or build a calculator software, let me say. So whatever code that Ellie will run would build a calculator software. And after it does that, Ellie would be able to do his 1+1 or his 2+2. That's infrastructure as a service. He has to do all those three things. Now, when it comes to platform as a service, the infrastructure has already been provisioned for you, and all you have to do is to run your code. So Ellie would just go ahead and run his what's it called, calculator app, and then he will be able to perform whatever addition or subtraction he has to do. And when it comes to software as a service, Ellie will just go in there with his 1+1, run it, guess his answer, and then that's it. So Lambda is platform as a service. You do not provision any servers or infrastructure. You just go and run your code, and then you pay for the computing time that you use. So while your code is not running, Lambda does not charge you. Yakubu.
Okay, so like I was trying to strike the difference between this and then the user data, the one we did in previous lectures. So I remember that the user data, you said you are able to run the code just once when you start the service. But then for this one, so if you want a particular say you want to run code several times, you use the Lambda instead.
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You're welcome. So with the user data tool, you need to have your EC2 provision. So user data comes in when you're provisioning your EC2 instance. But with Lambda, it's not instance related. You can just run the code on their platform. So it's like their computer, and then all you do is to run your code. So let me give an example. You could set your Lambda function to trigger whenever whenever a user uploads something to your S3 bucket. So you would include in your code a system that checks that something has been uploaded to an SD bucket. So probably after it's uploaded, the Lambda code would probably just maybe make a copy of it and send that copy to somebody else. Let's just say that's what your Lambda code does. So you'd program it to trigger whenever an object is uploaded to an S3 bucket. So as soon as it triggers, it runs the code, and then your object does whatever the code has been configured to do. Is that okay, Yakubu?
That's okay.
Okay. So as I mentioned, you don't need to bother about server and operating system maintenance. That's AWS's job in this setup. And you can also set up your code to automatically trigger from other AWS services. You can also call it directly from web or mobile application. It supports Go, Node.js, Java, C, Sharp, Python, and Python. So this is a typical example use case for Lambda. A user captures an image and they upload the image into the S3 bucket. So you integrate your Lambda with S3, and then it triggers your Lambda function. So whenever S3 detects a new upload, your Lambda function is triggered. And what your Lambda function is doing is calling Amazon recognition. So Amazon recognition would retrieve the image from S3 and return labels for the detected property. So this is an example where you use Lambda to get something done when an image is uploaded to your S3 bucket. So Amazon recognition is another AWS service that detects things in an image. So it's able to read the image and say or tag whatever it is looking at. Okay, so this is kind of unrelated, but who can tell me what we would need to do for our Amazon recognition service to retrieve our image from S3? Is IAM related? Giving permissions to a service so that that service can perform some action inside another service. Yakubu.
Okay, so I think we can use IAM rules, and then we give permission, and then the Amazon recognition will assume that rule. So that rule will just be for retrieving image from S3, and that's the only thing that the Amazon recognition will do.
That's excellent. Thank you, Yakubu.
You're welcome.
So we can use roles to give AWS services access to other services. So that's way they're able to perform some action inside that that other service whenever they wear their hats, whenever they have the role attached to themselves. So Amazon recognition can identify objects, people, text, scenes, and activities. It provides very accurate facial analysis and recognition. So it's one of the AI tools for the AI set of services for AWS. So in this code, Lambda retrieves the image and from S3 and it returns labels for property and its amenities. So other use cases for Lambda would be automated backups, processing objects uploaded to S3, events-driven log analysis. So last week we looked at how CloudTrail, when it records logs, it puts them inside an S3 bucket that you specify. So you can configure Lambda to analyze those logs. So you can, the trigger can be that every time CloudTrail drops a log inside S3, then Lambda should run some code that will analyze it. So we thought that we can analyze our logs with CloudTrail Data Lake. Another analysis tool that we can use to would be Athena. So you'd configure these services so that whenever a log is dropped, whenever a log file is dropped inside the S3 bucket, it would immediately start to analyze it. So that's way when you go looking at your logs, it's not now that you're going to be looking at them one by one, but you'd have the results, the analyzed version, instead of just the plain logs. events-driven transformations, so changing something from one form to another. So an example is when you have to load data into a system for probably analysis or something, you need to make sure that it's in a format that wherever you are loading it into, it can accept. So you can also use Lambda to transform the state of whatever object or whatever item, Internet of Things, and operating serverless websites. Okay, so shell scripting commands are run directly from the command line of an operating system. They are available on any machine, on any operating system without the need to install software. Different environments require different syntax or types of shell scripting. We've looked at Bash, and I've mentioned Zesh being Bash being the default Linux shell, and Zesh also kind of like a Unix shell, but it's the default on Mac OS. I believe Windows is CMD. So we noted that we did not have to install any additional features when we needed to use our CLI, when we needed to run commands on the CLI. The commands already came with the shell. And we mentioned that the shell is what determines the commands that you would be able to run. So comparing shell scripting and Python. Shell scripting is a powerful tool for administration and CLI work, but it can be challenging if you want to use more complicated data structures. So this is scripting, and then the other is programming, because scripting is like a, let me say, simpler form, and then programming is for more complicated or more complex software. So an example, Python can create an HTTP server in a single line, but it would require many lines of code to do the same action in Bash. So we mentioned that usually inside the cloud we'll be operating on Linux systems. And we mentioned that Bash is a way for us to automate those processes or those operations that we do. But Bash has some limitations, or for more complicated automation tasks, or for more complicated automation tasks, it would be better to use Python than to use Bash. Another reason too is that Python has external libraries and resources. So the way Python comes by default, if the functionality is not enough for you, or you feel like you would require extra functionalities, you'll be able to import libraries. So that's like a, let me say, a set of functions that you can run to be able to help you inside of your Python code. And Python is a complete programming language. Okay, let me call someone who hasn't spoken today. Theresa. Terry.
It's my twin sister.
Does Python use an interpreter or a compiler?
Should I answer?
Pardon?
Akosia,
Hello.
should I answer? I'm answering my
Okay,
sister.
Nana wants to answer, so let's have Nana answer.
All right.
Please, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, it's an interpreted language.
All right, thank you. What is a use case for shell scripting? Guys, almost everybody submitted their assignments that we gave you guys on creating a user. So please tell me another use case for shell scripting. What can you use Bash shell scripting for? And
You can use Bash shell scripts to run any sort of command. For example, you can touch files, you can CD, you can check the status of services, you can stop services, you can install new services.
all right, thank you. And Terry. Okay, your hand is down.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you can.
Kubu.
Oh,
Okay, go
oh,
ahead, Terry.
you can also use it to monitor a system or even manipulate files.
All right. Thank you, Terry. Yakubu.
Yeah, so I remember we can use bash shell scripting for cron tabs.
Yeah, for cron jobs to configure our system
jobs.
to run some command at a particular time. Thank you, Yakubu. Kofi Atom.
Yeah, so for cron jobs, that's for automating processes, yeah, repetitive tasks.
All right, thank you, Kofi. Okay, so thank you all for that. So yes, you've said it all. We use bash shell, we use shell scripting to automate tasks. So any tasks that we have to perform inside our system, we can just list some commands so that when we run the script, they will just run in that order. And we are also saying that though bash helps us to complete all of that, Python would help us get more done, let me say. ID, integrated development environments, and 2 different IDs which can be used to write Python code, Eclipse, Spider, Notepad, etc. Okay. So after yesterday's class, how many of us were able to complete some of our labs? So right after the introduction to programming lesson, there's like 10 labs. So how many of us were able to complete some of them?
I haven't started.
Okay, so like they're really let me see, simple and straightforward. So it's like short labs. So like they look a lot, but they're just yeah, short labs that you can complete. And then we can go on with them. Can move on to Python programming. Okay, Calvin and Derek. All right, thank you.
So with the lab, when I completed and submitted it, I was graded as 1 out of 1. But when I opened the second lab, I can't submit it again. So I don't know why.
Okay, the submission, like where you click to submit is grayed out.
Yeah. No. When you open it and you start the lab, after completing the first lab and you submit it, yeah, when you go to the second one, you can't submit it again. And with the graded side, it's all marked 0, 0, 0, 0, but submission is 1 out of 1.
Okay, please, is it the only person who has experienced this? Okay. Okay, so I'll have to find out about it for you, Calvin. But if it's showing that it's 1/1, then that means we'll be able to tell that yes, you've submitted it. So when you go to the grade section, it shows that it's 1/1 for that particular lab,
Yeah,
right?
no, just for submission. But the rest of the topics, like let's say hello world and the rest are marked out 0.
So when you go to the grade section, you have
Yeah.
1/1 for which one?
Submission.
I was here.
Yes, Derek.
Please, can I come in? Okay.
Okay, you want to help?
Yeah, come in. Come in.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that under the Python labs, all the
Yeah.
9 labs are one.
Oh,
So
okay.
if you finish the first one, you have to do the second one, third one to the ninth one before you submit.
Wow.
If you do only one, it means you've left the rest. That's how it is.
Oh, okay. I didn't
Yeah,
know.
so you
So
have
I thought it was like the previous ones when you are done with the first one, just submit, then continue with the second one. I didn't know you have to do all before submitting.
actually myself, I would have made the same mistake, but I watched a video on it before I
Oh, okay.
realized that. Yes.
All right.
So you can still go back and do it. It wouldn't change
No,
anything.
I can do it, but I can't submit it. That's the
Apo.
Oh, but actually, that's how it is. So we should all take note of it.
oh, okay.
All
Thank
right,
you.
bro. You're welcome, bro.
All right, thank you, Derek. Calvin, I'll let Francis know so that it won't be an issue when it's being recorded.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Emmanuel Kanting.
Yeah, because I'm also facing the same challenge. I actually did for the Hello World and I submitted, but for the submission I saw 1/1, like as Calvin just said. So I'm also facing the same problem as he's also facing.
Okay, then I'll add your name.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So before we move on to the next topic, which is basics in Python, can anyone tell me, okay, I will call someone to tell me the name of AWS's IDE. Cool. Derek Appiah. Richmond Amwa. Okay, thank you. And who can tell me the name of the AWS service that runs your code? So you just provide it with the code and it runs it. You can configure it to trigger on some event. John Harold.
AWS Lambda.
All right, thank you, Harold. Okay, so that is it for this slide. We will be looking at the basics in Python. Before I go on, are there any Python programmers in this class? I went through the introductions and I saw Penty, Ruben, Dennis. So all of you said you had a basic understanding in Python. Does anybody have like let me say mid-level or advanced Beatrice? Okay, Beatrice is not on today.
It's my
Okay.
group. It's my group.
Okay, so we're going to be having more demonstrations like with this session. So I just want you guys to be ready to help out in case of anything. Okay.
Akosia, I did for you.
Thank you, Ima.
I was about to mention you, Manodo.
Okay, so today we'll be installing Python on a Linux server. Would define some basic Python terminologies and would also declare variables in a Python script and perform operations on those variables. And at the end of the lesson, we should be able to explain statements, functions, and exceptions. So we mentioned that Python is compatible with Microsoft's Mac OS and Linux. Innovation. So this is the first demo. Okay, so just so we have a leveled ground, I would install it on my EC2 server. So that when anybody is practicing, they will be able to the instructions is about CentOS. I think the server is Ubuntu. The server I have is Ubuntu. So I don't even know. Okay, I think we'll just use the Ubuntu. Just use the Ubuntu like that. Okay, it's not even Ubuntu. Okay, let me just create a new instance. Why is the search not working? Okay, I think I'll just. I think I'll just use Ubuntu. T2 Merkle. I think T3 is also. And we have this one already. Okay, this is okay. This is okay. Okay, we have our instance. Let me reshare my screen. Okay, so we have a
Jose, unya yuko tunauta mama wai.
we have
You
our
got
instance. It's bigger.
Hey, they will try to do.
Hey, manager, pay your
sorry,
God.
sorry. Hey, sorry.
Manager one, d'accord.
Okay, so CD into download and okay, so we are inside our EC2 instance. Let me move this from here. So back to the instruction. Okay, we do not have Python installed, but just to check, Terry.
Because yeah, please let me take it back some more. I'm taking it
Okay.
back. When you say you've entered our EC2 instance, what does it mean?
So it means that, for example, you've booted your computer, use a Windows machine, right?
Yes, please.
So you've turned on your Windows machine, you've entered your password, and now you are inside your machine, and you've opened your CLI, your CMD.
Mhm.
So right now we are inside our computer or we're inside our server, and we'll be able to perform whatever we want to do using the CLI.
Okay.
Yeah, so the Ubuntu server that we have, the OS that we have is Ubuntu server. There's also Ubuntu desktop. So the way you would perform things on your Windows, you point and click. So for you to install Python on Windows, you would go to python.org, you download all those things. We are doing it with the CLI. Is that
All right.
okay?
All right. Is that okay?
Okay. So because the OS is different, I don't know if we'll still be able to use this, but let's just try. I think this will definitely change. No, let me just Google how to install Python on Ubuntu. I think the Ubuntu we're using is 22.04. So guys, what's happening now is the instructions inside here is for CentOS, but I'm using Ubuntu instead. So I'm just finding the steps to follow online. Okay. So you can also provision a CentOS server when you are practicing and then follow these instructions to the letter. It should be able to get you what you're looking for. Yakubu.
Yeah, so I think that from the labs that we do is like it's a little different from what we are doing now. I think the labs you do putty and then you copy and you copy the public IP.
You're talking about SSH.
Yes.
Yeah, so depending on where you're coming from, if you're coming from a Windows machine and you don't have open SSH, you have to go and tick it somewhere in your Windows machine. If you don't have that ticked, for I think Windows 10 and later, then you won't be able to do this. You'd have to use git bash, so that bash would help you run the SSH command. The CMD by default doesn't have it, but I think Quantin or someone mentioned that if you make that change, you'd be able to SSH just like how I have SSH now.
Oh, okay. Now, but I'm using a Windows machine and then okay, I get it now. So for Windows, you use the putty, right?
Yes, you can use putty or you can install git bash so that that shell will give you that SSH command.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so we looked at how apt is the Play Store for Ubuntu. So I would go with this first documentation. Okay, so installing via apt. So yeah, do app update. So we're just updating our Play Store. Let me see our packages. And luckily for us, there's
Hello, Akosia. Sorry. Can I
yeah.
please ask a question here?
Okay.
Which instance did you provision? Ubuntu?
Yes.
But I have say, but Python 3 is already installed.
Oh, okay. Then let me run Python 3 version.
Python 3 dash dash version.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, so I'll just describe the installation process since we have it already installed. So sudo apt install Python 3. So running this command would go to the Play Store or go to apt and it would try to find us Python 3 and it would install it on our server. And we're using sudo because this kind of administrator or manager operations is reserved for the root. So just adding sudo so that you can wear the root hat and perform the action. So after the installation, then you'd be able to run python dash dash version just to confirm that truly it has been installed. So if it has been installed, you'd see the version that has been installed. If not, they would say command not found or something like that. Yeah, so that's it. We have installed Python on our Ubuntu server, or those of us who don't have it, that is how to install Python on our Ubuntu server. And by default, if the OS you're using is not Ubuntu but CentOS, Python v27 is already installed. In our case, it was Python 3. Okay. So Python 2.7 was running, then later you would learn how to update your Python version. So these are the commands if you're using CentOS. So here we used apts. They would use yam for CentOS. And I think Amazon EC2 Linux 2 uses yam. So the file that has the program, okay, so the way your .exe or whatever that you use for your Windows machine, in this case, you would have to download that file, but it comes as a zip.tgz. It's a zip file. So after you download it, you would unzip it with this command. After you unzip it, you get the content of it or you extract the content of it, and then you would then be able to install it. And you no longer need a zip, and then you can be able to remove that from your system. Yeah, so that's what this does. Okay, so basics of the Python syntax. When we mention syntax, we're talking about grammar, we're talking about rules that you need to follow whenever you are coding in Python or whenever you are writing your Python code. And it uses indentation and spacing to group blocks of code together. So if we looked at indentation today, where you start, for example, you start whatever code from here, and then on the next line you come and start from somewhere here. So it could be double, like 2 indentation, it could be 4 spaces, 2 spaces, depending on what you're writing. If you get runtime errors, so when you run your code and you get errors, first check your spacing and then check for indentation for any missing punctuation such as colon, etc. And Python, just like Bash, is case sensitive. Capitalization matters. So if you define a variable called AMA and it's capital A and you try to call that variable, do not use small a because it would not know what you're talking about. So this is one of the syntax rules, indentation and spacing. Identifiers are entities inside your code. They could include class, functions, and variables, and they help to differentiate one entity from another. And these are some rules that you need to follow when you are naming your objects in Python. So when you're labeling your identifiers, these are some rules to follow. It cannot start with the digits. So if, for instance, you want to store a variable, you can't have your variable start with 1. That's invalid for your identifier to start with the digits. And keywords cannot be used as identifiers. Who remembers any keywords from yesterday? Awuku wrote a code inside the chat, and I saw a number of keywords inside. Who remembers some keywords from yesterday? Awuku.
Awuku, find my answer.
Awuku, the code that you wrote yesterday about age.
Copy and paste.
Okay. So a keyword that I heard you guys or was mentioned a lot yesterday was if, elif, else, if, those things. So you cannot have a variable and give it that name. So I really don't know what use case you have for you to call your variable if, but it is not allowed. Other keywords include import. We use import to get the libraries. So you will not be able to assign a variable and call it import. Okay. Ima has also given us one, printf. You would not be able to printf is a function. So keywords cannot be used as identifiers. And you can't also use special symbols like exclamation mark, at, hash, dollar, and percentage inside your identifiers. But identifiers can be any length. So you can have your identifiers be as long and short as you want. So we've established that the file extension for Python files is .py. So whenever you create your Python file, just always make sure that it's a.py, because we mentioned that the extension of a file will determine what processes you can run on it. So it will determine how the system is able to interpret or able to process whatever is inside the file. All right, so functions. Yeah, return is also a keyword. A function tells the computer to do a specific task. So print function, for example, would show us or would display the name of whatever arguments we put inside the bracket when we call the print function. Functions have a name and they are invoked by adding parentheses after the name. So when we call the print function, we add parentheses after. That's what shows that we are calling or we are invoking the print function. And a lot of functions take arguments, like how this print function has taken this 10. One useful function is the print function, and you can write your own functions. Python has native functions. So Python comes with some functions that we can use already. They are inbuilt. So by default, as long as you have the Python program, you should be able to run those functions without, or you should be able to invoke or call those functions without needing to install additional libraries or anything of that sort. So those are inbuilt functions in Python. So apart from print, we also have dict, we have dir, we have yesterday we looked at int. So when you call the int function, and then you put your arguments in brackets, it converts whatever it is into an integer. So yeah, there are various functions that come with Python. So just by having Python, you'll be able to call or invoke those functions to perform something inside of your code. Let's have a review of the Vim editor. Let me bring this down so that I will ask you people directly. So inside Vim, what do we use to... Okay, what are the two modes inside Vim? This is a review, so what are the two modes inside Vim? First, what is Vim? I hope all of us here know what Vim is. Lomoko. Okay, Janin. Janin, please, what is Vim? This is a review. This is something we've already done, so I believe everybody here should know.
Hello, Akosia.
Yes.
Okay, so Vim is a text editor in
Okay.
the Linux environment.
All right.
And then we have the insert mode.
Okay.
So that's one of the modes in Vim.
All right, thank you. So when we're looking at Linux, we mentioned that we have text editors in Linux. We have Vim, Vi. Who remembers the other ones?
Nano.
Thank you. Nano, Emacs, etc. So
Yeah,
those are text editors inside Linux, and Vim is just an improved version of Vi. And inside Vim, we have two modes, the command mode and then the insert mode. Inside the command mode, you'll be able to tell the text editor to run some command to do something. So probably to perform a write, then you put the colon W. If you want to quit, you put the colon Q. If you want to do both, colon WQ. So when it is inside command mode, you will be able to give commands directly to the text editor. Now, when you press I, it would enter the insert mode. So when Vim is in insert mode, anything you type, so even if you type this colon WQ, it will not write or quit. It will just take it as text or as characters inside the Vim file or inside the file that you are editing. So if you want to go back to your command mode, what key do you press? Dennis.
Escape.
All right. Thank you, Dennis. So you press escape and then you go back to your command mode. Then you'd be able to give Vim whatever commands that you have for it. And so if it's after your edits, then you have your WQ and then you leave. Dennis, you have a question? Okay.
Oh, please, no.
Okay, so we know all of this. So to W for write, so you write the, or you write to the file, then you quit. Okay, so we are going to create a file and then we'll put some text inside the file. How do I create a file in Linux? What's the command? This part is interactive, so you can just unmute and say it because I'm not looking at my Zoom screen.
All right, you can use the touch command.
Thank you. So touch, we use touch when we have to create any file. But we can also use the text editor name and then specify the file that we want. What does this do for us? It does two things.
Come again.
We can use touch to create the file, but we can also use the text editor name. So let's say we want to create a text file. We can use the text editor name and then we specify the file. So for example, nano and then rm.py. What would this command do?
So it will launch the text editor with the blank file content, but then the file has been named already.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. So if the file already exists and then you specify or you mention the text editor and include the file, then it will just open the file for you. But if the file does not exist, it would create the file for you. So let me run an ls so that we see that truly there's nothing there. And then we do vim. So these are assignment one. So I'll just say assign one dot, so we are creating a Python file. So dot what?
.py.
Thank you. Okay. And we want to put inside this file, print hello world. So insert mode. Okay. Print. Hello world. Okay. So back to command mode, colon, write and quit. So when we run ls again, we see our assign one.py. When we cut it, we see that it has okay, yes, the other this thing. So let me open it again. Insert mode. Okay, at the end. Like this. All right. Okay, correct. We've saved the file and we return to the command line. Run the file with Python and observe what happens. Okay, so how do we run a file with Python?
Type Python.
Sorry. Hey.
Python 3. We are using Python 3.
Okay.
But I think if you just leave it like that, it should work.
Okay, let's
Okay,
try and
that's
see. So, and then the file name.
Oh,
No,
okay,
you
I
have
see.
to enter Python before you.
Yeah, so either we create an alias so that you don't have to type the whole thing.
Okay.
Yeah, that's another option. Yeah.
Okay, so right now there are two options is to install the Python without the 3, because as I now we do not have that
No,
installed.
Akosia, sorry. You
Yeah.
can specify Python 3, then the name of the file, or you create an alias called Python and then equal to Python 3 so that you don't have to type Python 3 all the time.
Okay. So we either okay, so because we have Python 3, we will not be able to get Python itself. Is that what you're saying, Ima?
Yes, because
Yeah,
Python 3 is the
Oh,
latest
okay.
version. That's the
Okay.
latest version, yeah.
Okay, I get that. So we would have to run it with Python 3 or would have to define an alias.
Yes.
So the alias, we mentioned that when we define it on the command line just like this, it doesn't persist. But when we go into our bash rc, our bash configuration file, and we define it there, it persists. I'll just use Python
But
3.
Python 3 is not difficult to type, so I think you
I
can.
know, right? It's just adding the 3. So we are running Python 3 on our so please who can tell us what just happened after we run Python 3?
And so open the content in assignment one.py. So that's the hello world.
Okay, who else?
It ran the command, it ran the file because it's a
Yeah.
Python. It executed it. So that's the result of the content in assign1.py.
Okay, so thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Calvin. So we run the Python scripts by calling the Python command, and then the parameter or the arguments we give it is our file name. And inside our file, the code we had was print hello world. So that's the command, that's the Python command that we specified inside our file or inside our program. So when we run it with the Python program, then it ran the command and gave us the results of the command that we specified inside, or of the code that we specified inside our assignment one .py file. Please, is that okay? Does anybody not understand what is happening?
It is, but I will have a question.
Okay. Auku.
I also have a question.
Okay. Okay, since we lost Auku, so Perez, you can ask your question.
It's Yakubu.
It looks like my network is back, but
Wait, who said they had the question first? I thought it was Auku.
yeah, I was just wondering if, let's say, you don't specify the type of Python you have, let's say Python 3, you do only Python, would it run?
No, it won't. I think that's what we did here, right? Where is it? Yeah, this line. So we just did Python, and then we specify the
No, the last one where we're trying to run the okay. Yeah, I think I see that now. All right.
yeah. There was a second person. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so for the bash scripting, if like you have to type is it the bin bash?
Oh yeah, the shebang.
Yeah, the shebang. But
We didn't need that in Python.
okay. All right. But then it's needed with bash shell scripting.
Yes, it's needed in the bash script.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right, thanks.
You're welcome. Was it Calvin or someone else? Okay, so I believe we can move on from this since everybody understands. So we'll treat comments next, and comments are notes to yourself and to other developers. So usually we will be working in teams, and you would not be the only one that will be looking at your code. Maybe somebody else will need some insights into something. And what makes you a good programmer is that they don't have to run to you for everything. So maybe they see something they don't understand, they come and ask you or something like that. So it's not even just for them, but also for yourself, for you to be able to make sense out of the code you've written. Because we are humans, we can forget, we can get confused sometimes and stuff like that. So comments just describe the content of your program and how it works, so that if anybody is reviewing the source code, they can understand it. So in a company, for instance, the developers might write some code, but before they can push it to production, or before they can send it out for users to use. Let me put it that way. Someone would have to review it. Okay, so when this person is reviewing it, usually it would usually be somebody in like with more experience or somebody in higher authority. The person should not have to come to you and ask for, okay, what does this mean? What does this mean? It's as much as possible, you should be able to describe the contents of your program and how it works, so that if someone is looking through it, the person would be able to make sense of it. So when you use the hash sign, you are telling the system that you are writing a comment, okay? So it will not take whatever line of code that you put after the after the hash sign. It will not take that line of code. It won't run it because it's just a comment. So the system knows that it is a comment and it does not have to run that line of code. So how you make comments is to put the hash sign and then follow whatever code or whatever line or whatever description. So then it's like free range. You don't really have to follow any strict Python syntax rules. You can just write in English because the system knows to ignore everything after this hash sign. Musa?
Yeah, of course, yeah. Then who is it meant for? The comment.
It's for you, it's for anybody else, your team members, anybody who is going to be looking at the code.
Okay.
Okay. So we're going to do a demo on commenting too. So the file that we already had, we are going to insert some additional text and then we see what happens. So that is our file and we want to edit it. Insert mode. Okay. So we're putting I think to make it more what's it? To make it more interesting, let me do it. This same print hello world, I would bring it here. So that we see like the direct difference between both. Okay. This works. Writing tracked. Okay. Escape. Okay, so when we cut our file, these are the contents. We have print hello world, we have hashtag, I have AWS, and we have print hello world again, but with a hash sign in front of it. So who can tell us what we're going to get after I run this? Or who can guess what
Hello world.
the results to get? Okay. So yes, we see that these were kind of not like nothing happened on these. Okay. The system knew to ignore it, and then it just concentrated on the line that did not have the hash sign. Okay.
Is it because of the hash sign?
Yes, the hash sign means that is a comment. So the system should ignore whatever is on the line.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Let me do let me remove this hash sign from here. Oh. Okay. And then escape. Let me run it again. So I printed twice because now we've removed the hash sign from the second code or from the second command, and it just goes ahead and runs it. So hello world, hello world. Okay. So that brings us to data types. They determine what kind of data is stored inside an object. And Python stores the type of an object with the object. When any operation is performed, it checks whether the operation makes sense for that object. So it's called dynamic typing. When you equate or when you assign a variable, a value to a variable, Python infers what data type it is. So whenever you run a command calling that variable or run any command on that value, Python would first check whether the operation you are trying to do makes sense for that object. So for example, some functions in Python, they expect a certain, guys, give me 1 second. Okay, so for example, some functions or some methods in Python, they expect a certain data type. So for example, you're using a function that calculates probably some mathematical function. Okay, so we've mentioned that when you introduce a function, when you invoke a function, you bring the parenthesis. Inside the parenthesis, you specify your arguments. So if the function you are calling probably is going to calculate pi, let's say the function you are calling is to calculate pi, the arguments that are inside the parenthesis, you cannot put a boolean, you cannot put a string. Strictly, it has to be a number, an integer, or the other one, float or a long. Okay, so depending on what function you'll be calling, there are some data types that make sense to be used in that function or not. So Python would evaluate and check that, okay, this person is asking me to perform this function on this value, but does this value have the properties? Does this value have the capabilities to be able to be put into that function to run? If not, if it doesn't, then it will throw an error. So these are the basic data types. Integers, they are whole numbers and they can be negative or positive. For 3,000, negative 29. Floats. A float is a number that contains a decimal. They can also be negative. So these are examples of floats. 3.39, 8.0, etc. Bool. They are conditions, so true or false. So a bool always is just these two options or defaults. So it's either true or it's false. And capitalization matters when using the bool data type. Strings are a set of characters that are enclosed in quotation marks. They could be double, they could be single. So in Python, yesterday Dennis helped us understand that in Python, both of them are allowed, but the developer's preference to comes in because people would want to use the double one when they have a longer string, so probably like a whole sentence, but then they would want to use the single one when it's just probably just a character or yeah. So strings can include numbers, letters, and special characters. So as long as they are inside the quotation marks, Python knows to infer, Python knows to understand them as strings. So it doesn't matter what you're putting in there, as long as it is inside of those quotation marks, then Python is saying that, or Python is understanding it as being a string. So yeah, this is a note. Even if you put numbers inside of quotation marks, they are still strings. Python would not consider them as integers or floats. Okay, it's 3:30, I believe we can end here for today. And tomorrow we would start with mutable versus immutable data types. Please, are there any questions before we end? Penty.
No, it's not really a question. It's a complaint. So you'll be done with the question first. When you are done, then I'll
Okay.
hit you with the complaint.
Okay, Terry.
It's also a complaint as well.
Hey. Okay, but are there any questions, guys, about what we've treated so far? Okay, so let me take my complaints.
Okay, because the data does not come here too.
Oh yeah. So did you fill out the form I sent?
I did, please.
Yeah, so I've shared what's it called? The link with him. So I'm here to hear back from him, but by tomorrow, dear, I should have a more definite answer for you. Penty.
Yes,
Yes,
I think
yes, ma'am.
it's
Yes, ma'am.
revolving around the same thing. And also with the code signal assessment, kindly tell him to update the database so that we can get access to what we've done. For my week now, I think I did mine last Thursday, but till now it has still not shown the dashboard that's been updated or something.
Okay, but your dashboard is up to what week?
It's the second week. It's up to the second week.
And you have 0.00.
Yes, still 0%. And I'm done
Oh,
with all the three code signals already. So
okay. Okay, then I'll let him know.
yes.
Dennis.
Yeah, so the dashboard, my dashboard as well, showed 100% participation, but the attendance is 80 something still.
So with the attendance, what's his name? Yesterday, Isaac made us understand that if, for instance, the whole duration of the class is 248. I'm using 248 because that's the last one I saw. So let's say the whole duration of the class is 100 minutes. You should have stayed for like 50 to 75 minutes. And when I went there, I noticed that nobody had 100% for attendance. The highest I saw was 95. Did anybody get more than 95?
Oh, I had 93.
Okay. So
Even that one, I question it. I'm
But
questioning it
we always stay through
because
on the
I
call.
always sleep here. I always sleep here.
Hmm.
Sometimes when the meeting starts at 8:30, for me I join at 7 o'clock. I just join. I just go to work.
So
It's
I'm
true.
still trying to understand what happened because first I was suspecting that probably one person stayed later than everybody one day. Then that's why everybody has. But when I went to, nobody had that's 100%. So I'm still trying to understand what happened because the highest I saw was 95, and I really don't know
Wow,
why.
it's still more than 95.
So I really had to understand how he calculates the attendance score. Yeah,
Okay.
that would
Of
help.
course, yeah, so Jesse's data has gone with just like that.
Jesse.
Because Jesse has been sitting here all day for thinking that
Oh,
you get time.
yeah. So it depends on the total duration of the call. So I think from now going, maybe we should just like end it for everybody when we are leaving. Because the people who joined for the actual duration of the class, those who stay late, you make those people's minutes be small. I don't know if you understand what I mean.
But Akosia, sometimes
Hello,
we
Akosia.
have
Can I please come in,
discussions.
Akosia?
Yeah,
But then
ma.
he's using an average.
Okay, so this is my take. I think we should just keep it simple. We know a session start from let's say 1:30 and ends let's say 4 o'clock. So that should be the maximum they should use to do the calculation. I don't think they should use anything more, else we are complicating everything. Because I've been attending, yes, there are sometimes glitches joining here and there, but and then you tell me that maybe my average attendance is, let's say, 90. To me, you're not being fair to me, because just let us keep it simple. If the total is 2 hours, we use 2 hours to do the calculation.
But
It's true.
sometimes classes will be shorter, sometimes they will be longer. So I believe that's why he has that dynamic way of doing it. But I would also put this suggestion in front of him and see what he says.
Yeah, but
All
still
right.
with my
So,
first month, we all challenge
Akosia,
this.
why won't you people, maybe you put in some factors to pick up those unique hours that maybe you skip? Or maybe there is no activity, as you are saying, when it's not factored. Maybe you pick up those unique data and give it to him. That on this day there was this, on that day there was this, so that he
Okay.
will put those factors into consideration and then do it.
Yeah. He's able to raise exceptions sometimes. So if it's like a special case,
Yeah.
we reach out to him about it.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Pensy. Dennis, you were saying something else.
I was just saying that, we could have just let this go, but because it's going to be a cumulative something at the end of the day, if you are missing even small percentage, it's going to affect maybe the future overall average.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
that is why I want to make sure that, like all the checks are being done right now, so that we'll not have maybe somebody feeling maybe being treated unfairly and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, I understand.
And also, Akosia, would the data be picked monthly, or it's just going to be a continuous something until we are done with the program?
It's monthly.